so I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and the Chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for this hearing. It's helpful to touch base on where we are. I note that you've pledged to have transparent policy making and enforcement. And with that in mind, I'd like to understand better the recent domain name seizures by ICE, the so-called operation in our sites. I want to know how ICE decided which websites to target, and I'm also interested in knowing whether there is an assessment when it's a copyright case of whether there are affirmative defenses to alleged infringement, for example, fair use, and whether a site is in compliance with the Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown provisions is considered, and whether there is a consideration of whether taking down a site will involve censorship of material that is protected under the First Amendment. For example, in the recent domain name seizures, there were two hip-hop blogs called On Smash and Rap Godfathers. I know that from my staff, not from my own understanding of rap music. And it's my understanding that the sites had no downloads, they hosted no copyright material themselves. They were only linked to other sites. In fact, one of the sites claimed, I read this in the New York Times, that the labels themselves had asked them to link to some of the material because they were an influential fan site, and they both sites claimed that they were complying with the DMCA takedown provisions. Now, I want to know whether you think it's appropriate for ICE to seize the domain names of blogs such as this. Is that really a priority for enforcement? And do you have concerns about First Amendment implications when blogs such as this are seized? My understanding is that the top priorities under the Act are first, health and safety, links to organized crime, large-scale commercial counterfeiting and online commercial piracy, and trade secret thefts or economic espionage. How would this operation fit with those priorities, and how many, well, I guess that's a lot of questions for you to answer.
So first let me say, I think copyright enforcement, online enforcement, internet piracy is a big issue. It's a big issue for our economy, and I think it fits well within the mandate that Congress gave me in the Pro-IP Act. I think in terms of operation in our sites, as I've said repeatedly, we think increased law enforcement has to be part of what we are doing to try to battle rogue websites and the online piracy and counterfeiting problem that we face, with other actions as well by the administration and by the private sector, but increased law enforcement needs to be part of that. Operation in our sites is based on our seizure authority and has the due process protections built into it that will go along with any seizures.
Well, there aren't really any due. I mean, they've sued the department, and they've had to go to the expense of getting lawyers to sue you, but there's no real due process provisions.
Well, actually, before any seizure under operation in our sites is taken, the agents working with the prosecutors from DOJ have to go to a magistrate judge to get a showing of probable cause before they can take any action against the website. That is, and then, as you said, there is also the ability to challenge the seizure after the case. That is the due process that is built into our Constitution.
Well, with all due respect, I mean, judges sign a lot of things. For example, the free DNS takedown, it wasn't a copyright enforcement. It was supposedly a child pornography enforcement. ICE took down 84,000 websites of small business people that had nothing to do with child pornography at all, and put up a little banner saying this is taken down for child pornography, really smearing. If I were them, I'd sue the department. These were just small businesses. They had nothing to do with anything. and yet a judge signed that. So if that's the protection, it's no protection. I want to know, what is the department doing to think about the affirmative defenses, to think about, yes, there's piracy, and all of us are united that we ought to do something about piracy, but there's also a First Amendment that you should be considering when you go and destroy a small business. Are you thinking about that?
Yes, we are definitely thinking about that. And not to I will go back to your question, but just to say for a moment, I think one of the things that the United States as a government, can do very effectively in this space of online enforcement is take an approach, and we believe, a very well-considered approach that will serve as an example to other countries. We are a government that really cares about due process. We are a government that really cares about the First Amendment, and I think what we do is an example to other countries, but I think a very positive example, and I think we do consider all of those issues. We will continue to, and that's one of the reasons I think it's so important for the United States to be very active in this space. You mentioned a case, an incident recently related to child pornography. It's not an IP case, obviously,
right.
So I'm not familiar with the details, although I do know that ICE realized that there was a problem quickly and moved quickly over the weekend to rectify it. I understand from talking to our law enforcement that there are safeguards in place in operation in our sites to avoid any similar type of mistake from happening. And I guess I would just emphasize, as you also alluded to, what our law enforcement wants to do is go after criminals. That is what they do every day. That is, they are incredibly dedicated to that task, and I think that is where the administration is as well.
I have a lot of other questions, and perhaps I know we have an opportunity to submit them for the record, but I'll just say in closing that there is a lot of large-scale commercial piracy that's going on, and the department is doing very little about it. I think that that's something that needs attention. And some of the people who are into copyright enforcement in Silicon Valley, Mr. Berman, there are many of them, thought that, and I can't say what they said, it was chicken poo in terms of the report they saw. They thought it was small time, and the big fish are getting away. And I think that needs some attention. And I'll submit my further questions for the record. I yield back.
I thank the gentlewoman. The gentleman from Utah, Mr. Chafe, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. My understanding is part of your responsibility is regarding domestic but also international, and it's partly, most